Evolution is a complicated process. The fact is, descending from a single ancestor isn't exactly a straight and linear path. Much like the branches of a tree, offshoots can happen which may flourish or expire based on availability of sunlight and nutritional resources. In our own species, there have been a few offshoots of humanity going all the way back to Australopithecus and progressing towards Homo sapiens. One species in particular that we are aware of but still not 100% sure what happened to are Neanderthals. Odds are, however, they were just kind of bred out of existence by Homo sapiens a while ago, which is why I myself have more than 60% Neanderthal DNA than others according to my genetic profile. Anyhow, Caveman Roanoke confirmed, but apart from that, evolution is a constant and changing process. Species arise from it and even cohabitate in the same time periods as seen by the previously mentioned Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. In the movie The Descent, this is no different. An offshoot of humanity dating back likely tens of thousands of years has taken up in an area due to some reason not fully understood. Humans used caves as shelter back in the days of spears and rocks, but this particular group appears as though it was fully human at one point, but instead of continuing to leave the cave, they continued to dwell within it, which affected their bodies and adapted them to their surroundings. So it's pretty clear what we were talking about today. Let's discuss the cave dwellers from the movie The Descent and see what sort of adaptations formed due to these creatures' evolution under the surface. But before getting to that, I'm shamelessly advertising my fourth channel because we are approaching 10,000 subs on it. Just because Halloween is over, it doesn't mean the Spookfest needs to end. I'm still narrating stories over at Roanoke Tales if anybody's interested, and I will drop that link in the description. So, for all the new people, there will be a timestamp up on screen to bypass the summary of this movie. Odds are you probably have seen it as it was fairly popular and from 2005, but if you don't want it spoiled, head there, and if you really just kind of want to see the summary of events, well, then you're in luck. Alright, everyone else, let's see what happens when a group of women fight against cave monsters with razor-sharp teeth. Likely, it's nothing good. We open up our jaunty cave trip story with some kayaking and some overly awkward moments that I still don't really understand, having seen this movie like multiple times. As a small group kayaks down rapids, they get to their pickup point where Sarah pushes Juno into the water, and then the music kind of just turns ominous. I know you can't hear it, but it's like, okay then. Paul helps Juno out of the water and gets kind of weirdly personal and starts taking off her helmet while his wife tries to get out of the water and then goes to check on the kid. Nice job, Paul. As they drive off, it's clear that Paul is contemplating something while Sarah is trying to talk to him. Doesn't seem to be going all that well, and she asks him what's wrong. He mentions that he's just feeling distracted and actually is literally distracted as well. In a brief moment, someone with an unsecured load of copper pipes in Final Destination style runs into the car, sending the pipes through the head of Paul and presumably through the daughter in the backseat as well, as both of them are taken out in one fell swoop. Sarah wakes up in the hospital in an undetermined amount of time later, and then comes to the realization that something is wrong. She begins to hallucinate as she runs down the hallway with the lights turning off before coming to the end and then running into her friend Beth. I reckon it can be assumed that this must just be a few hours later, seeing as she still has her wounds and only her friend is really there, but Beth is actually the only person that stuck around, with Juno having long since left or never arrived. Also, what a great friend, and that great friendship will totally screw them later. After burying her family and a year later, a trip has been organized by Juno to go caving, and Sarah has flown out. It is supposed to sort of reunite the group. They all head to roughly my neck of the woods, known as the southeast of the United States. I do want to point something out though. For those of you in North Carolina, you may notice that this looks nothing like North Carolina. Watching this, I said to myself, bro, those aren't the right type of trees for this climate. Now, I'm not a botanist, and I'm not saying that those don't exist out in the Appalachians at all, but not to this capacity. This movie was actually completely filmed in England and Scotland. Oh, and on that note, my Dog Soldiers video, I want you to know that I do know those are different countries, but they are a part of the same kingdom, like a United Kingdom, like a UK perhaps. So anyways, that was just a quick fact for you. As they all convene at the cabin, they start popping bottles and having a good time. Sarah's a bit of a downer for, a moment, recalling what Paul said, or used to say, about loving daily. Regardless, more women have joined the troupe. Holly, Sam, and Rebecca are also avid cavers and want to explore and reestablish a connection with Sarah after the accident. As they all rage and have a good time, Holly mentions to Juno that the cave that they are slated to go to is just a major tourist trap. Because of that, apparently you can't have fun. Juno thinks about this as they head into the next day. Like an absolute psychopath, Juno then goes for a run early the next morning after a night of drinking. As she does, she hits up all the cabins and begins waking everybody up, getting them ready to go caving for the day. Predictably, everyone is in pretty rough shape from the night before, but everyone eventually starts to move. They take one last group photo before leaving, expecting the day to be an absolute blast. Unfortunately, fate is fresh out of fun and really only has bloodbath left over. They get into their cars and head out in the woods in what I can only assume is like a 2005 BMW SUV ad placement by how many shots it's in, and then they arrive at their parking location magnification, it zooms, it's really lame. Anyways, they begin to hike through the woods where they come across a deer corpse. This body is not really eaten to any capacity, but instead just has small bite marks on the neck. A predator would have probably dragged this thing off and eaten it a little more, which is strange to see. It disturbs the group, but they press on, stacking it up just being a mountain lion or a bear. As they continue to hike, they finally come to the opening of the cave. Now, believe it or not, I actually used to cave in college. Nothing quite like dropping into a cave. It's pretty fun, except for that one time that I got separated from the group and my flashlight died. Yeah, we had actually just watched this movie too. God. Anyways, they all seem a bit nervous, and Juno is the first to descend with the rest of the group following suit. Now, to spare you the whimsical wonder of a cave, the group walks around oohing and awing at it, which is pretty spot on. If you've ever got a chance to go, I'd say definitely go. Just don't let the bloodthirsty monsters get you, and don't dwell on that, and it shouldn't throw you off. As they enter one chamber of the cave, they begin to take a break and look around. Sarah is told to stick close, but she says that she will, and then she goes off to look for the next area. She eventually finds a route, and Holly moves through it to determine where it goes. As the rest of the group goes through, Sarah finally begins making her way through. However, while she does, she gets stuck and has a freak out. There is nothing quite like getting stuck in a cave with hundreds of thousands of tons of rock above your head. Definitely puts the old meat suit into a panic mode. While she panics, her friend turns around and attempts to calm her down. It quasi-works until a rumbling can be heard overhead. An aptly timed earthquake causes the cave to shake and move. This begins closing off the small tunnel in the cave, and the two quickly begin clambering out of it. They barely escape, but as they do, they forgot their rope bag, which they direly need later on. As they exit the cramped area and begin talking about other exits, the map they have is completely useless. However, because they don't know if those exits are even still open or even still exist. As they discuss how the park rangers will come to find them, Juno reveals that this cave system is not the one they said that they would be in. Instead, nobody is coming for them. Juno says that this is a completely undiscovered system, and she wanted them all to discover it together and maybe give it Sarah's name. Which the rest of the group calls BS on that and says that she was just seeking her own glory and brought them all to meet their end, essentially. Deciding they have no choice to go back, they now have to keep pressing on to see if the cave lets out somewhere else. They come across a massive cavern with an unknowable drop. It's too far to jump across, and they will need to manually set connection points to shimmy across, and as they do, one by one go. Juno is left to pull the points just in case it's needed later on, and then she falls. She is caught, but it slices open the hand of the belayer. Continuing through the cave, they find the first signs that others were there at some point. Cave paintings appear on the wall, which interestingly, if you look at one in particular, it suggests a woolly rhino which existed in western Siberia 8,000 years ago. What it was doing in North Carolina at this point is beyond me. As they move even further, they find climbing equipment from some people some time ago, believing it to be about 100 years old. Nobody uses that stuff anymore, which means more recently, someone had been down there, yet it remained undiscovered, which suggests that they never really got out. With this realization, the morale begins to drop deeper as they move deeper into the cave. Holly ends up seeing what she thinks is daylight and takes off running. Despite being told to stop that it's not daylight, she continues to haul away from the group. Completely by her own fault, she runs out and then falls into a hole. She is grabbed but eventually slips through the grasp and then breaks her leg, creating an open wound fracture. If you would like to know what that daylight was, apparently it was phosphorus. As they attempt to set the fracture and stabilize it by tying an axe to it, the sounds attract something in the shadows. Sarah goes to investigate, quickly seeing a creature but not being able to get a good look at it. As she peers into the darkness, Juno arrives to jump scare the crap out of her by asking her what's going on. She goes on to explain that she has seen something, and Juno reports back to the group that Sarah thinks that she saw something, but Sarah knows for a fact that she did. She begins explaining that this creature is out there and what it looks like to the rest of them as they incredulously listen to her. Now more slowly than ever making their way through the cave with Injured, they all begin to panic to a degree. They can hear something around them, and with Sarah saying she saw something earlier, Rebecca begins to call out into the cave, wanting to know if anyone may be there or listening. So this opens up an entire can of worms in the group. As the camera pans around, it spots a creature behind Beth staring at her with pointed ears and disfigured skin. It runs past, and the group panics. They point their flashlights up, seeing that these things are actually crawling on the walls and ceilings. An attack on the group ensues where Holly is eventually cornered by one and has her throat ripped out by a quick bite. When it does, Holly quickly drops due to the shock, and Juno and the creatures begin fighting over the body. Juno attacks the creature, and it lets out a yell, alerting other nearby subhumans. One jumps onto Juno, and the other takes the body away. Juno overpowers the beast, and then uses an axe to take it out. And here's a perfect example of why you don't sneak up on someone who's pumped up on adrenaline in a cave, being attacked by unknown creatures. Beth quietly approaches her for some reason, which Juno assumes is another monster, and then uses her axe to hit her through the neck. For real though, This is completely Beth's fault. I don't care what is said later in the movie. As Beth falls, she grabs onto Juno's necklace and pulls it off like, oh, what a massive betrayal. No, Beth, you could have said, hey, it's Beth. The group is, at this point, completely scattered, with them all ending up in different chambers. Sarah in particular ends up in the Boneyard. As she scans around with her camera, she finds many different types of animals, suggesting that these things are actually hunting on the surface, but she also finds human remains, indicating that they will definitely eat humans if given the chance. And she witnesses this firsthand as the creatures rip apart Holly right in front of her. Sam and Rebecca are currently hiding in a small dugout area of the cave as another one of these creatures move through. They attempt to stay as quiet as possible, but her watch ends up going off. Before the creature is able to kind of echolocate it and attack them, Juno is back up on her feet and begins yelling out for everyone. The creature hears this and then takes off to go locate her, leaving these two alone for now. As the creature approaches Juno, she shines her flashlight and it stops. It listens, but it can't seem to locate her until finally it just runs off. Moving back to Sarah, the creatures have had their fill and move out. She lights a torch and begins looking around the gore all around her. Seeing human remains and what's left of Holly, Sam, Rebecca, and Juno all meet back up as Juno takes out one of the creatures. As they do, they inspect it to see what it actually is. They see that it has massive ears, its skin is pale and devoid of pigmentation almost entirely, and they appear to be completely blind, with the pupil being as white as the eye because it is underdeveloped, suggesting that these things have been down here for a very long time. Generations, in fact. With Sarah still moving alone through the bone pit, eventually she does spot Beth laying on the ground. Beth is still alive, but unable to move very well, suggesting that maybe there is some spinal cord damage to the hit to the neck. She goes on to say that Juno did this to her, which again, I'm sorry bro, but you did this to yourself. However, she is correct in saying that Juno did leave her there to kind of meet her end, but again, after she fell, most people would have likely assumed the same thing. Beth is basically just, she's kind of a douche. Regardless, she hands Sarah Juno's necklace, which has the same words inscribed on it that Paul used to say, which indicates maybe there's a little more between Juno and Paul than Sarah knew. Beth is in a great amount of pain at this point, and she asks Sarah to end it. Sarah reluctantly agrees and then smashes the old brain case with a rock. Immediately after this, Sarah is attacked by a child form of these creatures. She ends up taking it out, and whoops, there's Mom to inspect why her child isn't moving anymore. Sarah takes off with Mom right behind her. She falls into a pool of blood and slowly resurfaces, and as she does, player 2 has entered the game and begins to attack her. She's able to grab a deer antler and then hits the creature directly in the head with it, taking her out in the process, and as she moves towards the torch, another appears and she bludgeons it with a bone, taking that one out as well. The other part of the group decides that they need to go back out the way they came, even though there's a little cave-in and there's nowhere to go. Juno, Rebecca, and Sam all try to escape, and as they do, Sam goes back up into the chasm area to set the points. As she does, another creature arrives and bites her throat out. Before she bleeds out, she is able to get a stab in and drops the creature, but she meets her end shortly after. As they watch this, Rebecca is then grabbed and pulled back by the creatures and eaten alive in front of Juno. Juno basically says screw that and jumps in, knowing that there is nothing she can do for anyone at this point. She lands in some water luckily, and as she does, the creature is down there that attacks Sam, and it's still alive. It begins to attack Juno, but she overpowers it and ends it under the water. After this altercation, this only leaves her and Sarah left. They all meet back up, and when they do, Sarah's looking a little worse for wear. However, they don't really have time to squabble with the newfound information as a group begins to attack them. After taking out multiple of these creatures, Juno then stands in front of Sarah. Sarah shows her the necklace, which indicates that she knows about the extracurricular activities that took place. They hear a screech, and then Sarah stabs Juno in the knee with the axe and leaves her to her fate. Juno looks out and sees roughly like 20 of them have shown up to attack, and a scream can be heard as she is eaten. Sarah finds sunlight amid a pile of bones and then begins clawing her way up and finally out of the ground. As she does, she runs through the woods and then gets into her car before driving down the road. She stops to throw up and looks over to see Juno. Now the question is, was this all a hallucination considering she has hallucinated before? Did she actually survive that crash, and was this just her brain's interpretation of hell? Well, interestingly, that's the American version. Not sure why she had to escape, but in the English version, it's a little darker, perhaps indicating that she actually is in hell. She wakes up after dreaming that she escaped, and she is still in the cave with the monsters. Pretty dark. So first things first, let's discuss what these creatures are and how they got there. Again, it's not a secret that humans actually used to use caves for protection from the elements, and with the constant temperature between about 49 to 52 degrees on average, there is a cave in Texas that is 70 degrees. This provides a great haven for humanity. Cool enough during the summer to get out of the heat, but warm enough in the winter that even a small fire can keep you warm and comfortable. However, these creatures are different from us Homo sapiens. They are what's known as a troglophile, not to be confused with troglodynes, who move in and out of cave environments like bats, or troglobites, which cannot exist outside of a cave and are permanent cave dwellers. Instead, it's more of a middle ground, and this is suggested by the the fact that the Boneyard shows they have plenty of creatures that live on the surface that they hunt, likely hunting at night seeing as pigmentation is low and sunlight would burn quite badly. This means that they bring their prey back to the cave to be consumed. Now, something to note about their designation is that if I really do wish there was more of a middle ground between Troglophiles and Troglobites. They would be leaning more towards Troglobites, and this is because of their adaptations that they display. Being closer in structuring, there are many differences between cave dwellers and humans that can be easily identified. Human adaptation is still a very real thing even to this day. In fact, it was recently discovered that more humans are growing an extra artery in their forearms. The median artery within the forearm usually goes away as we are formed in the womb, and the radial and ulnar arteries take over. However, in some people, all three arteries still exist into adulthood, meaning that it's a permanent trait. In the 1800s, it was observed that maybe 10% of the people had it, but today it can be found in 35% of humans. And if you had to ask me, I think the overall increase in exercising our society engages in, like bodybuilding and upper body exercises, has put biological pressure on this part of the body to deliver more blood, and as a result, this artery sticks around as it's being properly utilized. But that's just my hypothesis on it. Regardless, environmental pressure can cause adaptations to form, which we wouldn't see in other areas of the world, even in, say, like towns in northern latitudes where darkness is common. Not to mention the probability of inbreeding and the effects it had on these groups that remained isolated within the cave. So let's discuss what sort of adaptations that we see within the cave dwellers. Starting with the feet and basing this on the hands, we don't really see it that much. There's like one scene, and even then you can't really tell. But considering they are able to crawl up the walls and across the ceiling, it can be assumed that really the claws must be sharp, and the feet have likely had the toes lengthened to be able to grip onto the ceiling and hold on. Otherwise, it would be all upper body holding them, and that does not appear to be the case. The overall appearance of these creatures is that they are roughly humanoid in shape. Seeing as they stem from humans, this is completely unsurprising. However, their skin may be thicker than that of humans. This is judging by the fact that they appear in an area, like the cave, with no fire, or at least no use of fire in this cave system. The creatures would have to contend with 49 to 52 degree temperatures, which if you are completely exposed to, can over time cause you to enter hypothermia. So to combat this, the thickening of the skin would allow for better retention of heat. Not only that, but with this skin thicker, abrasions from the cave would likely be less serious than in regular humans. These adaptations allow them to exist within the environment and also move outside the cave for a limited amount of times. The hands, as mentioned, possess claws which can be used for slashing, and internally, their strength appears to be greater than that of a normal adult female. Now, the creatures that do attack are mostly male, which typically the male of a species will have a higher threshold of strength than a female. But considering how they move and crawl on their walls and ceilings, it would be like doing pull-ups every time you wanted to move. So they would likely be stronger than an adult male as well, or an adult human male. The face in general is where we see largely the greatest variance of adaptations within the body. The reasoning behind this is because this is where most of the senses are going to be, as well as adaptations in the brain, which we'll get to those in a moment. Concerning the face, moving to the mouth of this creature, it's clear to see that they are purely carnivorous. Humans are omnivorous, which is why we really don't have incredibly sharp teeth and we possess molars. However, with these creatures, every tooth is sharper than that of a canine, which is absolutely used for predatory purposes. Moving up to the nose, we see some variance amongst the populations. Some seem to have roughly a human-shaped nose, however, with the overgrowth of skin, like that scene when the camera is flipped into night vision, there are still some of those who have more like a slit, and it travels up the entire bridge of the nose. Likely this would be to draw the scent of prey in, seeing as these creatures are much more animalistic than human. Moving up to the eyes, we see that they are largely just underdeveloped. Their blindness is not so much because of just the sheer darkness of the cave, but due to the fact that eyes are actually incredibly expensive to maintain for our meat suits. We don't think about it, but forming and continually upkeeping the eyes in our day-to-day life utilizes a lot of vitamins and nutrients. Not to mention the constant stream of information to the brain and what it has to process as a result of this functioning organ. In the caves, these creatures only saw darkness, so without the need for them, over time the eyes just became less and less developed as nothing was put towards its survival, and instead it was really more of a tax on the body. We see this within the iris of the one that Juno takes out. Slightly blue around the iris, it turns milky white just a few millimeters out from that, indicating that this is really just a leftover trait at this point and serves really little purpose. Instead, the creature appears to hunt by a form of echolocation and likely scent. Scent, based on the actual structuring of the nose, would probably indicate that the olfactory bulb is more developed within these creatures, but they were not able to smell humans close to them, so I seriously doubt that's their main form of of actual hunting. However, concerning echolocation, this would imply that the temporal lobe of the brain is still quite developed. They would emit sounds much like that of a bat, which ironically, or really I guess unironically, their ears almost look like bats. The sound waves travel out, or the prey emits a sound, then the cave dwellers are exceedingly good at picking up the sound with their forward-facing ears. And this is how they are able to locate the women in the cave and continually find their location, despite the fact that the cave actually, believe it or not, muffles sound. When I got lost in the cave without a flashlight, I ended up yelling out for my group. I didn't hear anything and they didn't hear me. Eventually, I just followed the chamber's wall until I felt something that felt familiar, and I was like, oh, okay. And it turned out to actually be the passageway, in which case they were in the chamber right next to me. They just couldn't hear me. So caves are not always these echoey, billowing things. A lot of times it just completely screws sound. Anyways, getting to the internal portions of the brain, a few things can be assumed based on human evolution, reproduction, and environmental pressures. So it's clear, firstly, that this thing was likely a Homo sapiens at one point. Way back in the caveman days, looking at their overall height and build, they were not Homo neanderthalensis. And I do want to point something out because there is a, I guess, debate about is it Neanderthal or Neanderthal. The Germans pronounce T-H-A-L, at least from what I've come to understand, as a T sound, not a th sound. So it actually is Neanderthal, but nobody's gonna fault you for saying Neanderthal, by the way. Anybody who does, they probably should just get over themselves. Anyways, standing over the women, it appears that the males are roughly about 6 feet tall, or maybe even thal, or a little under 2 meters tall. The likely split between modern humans and this creature would have happened all because of the cave, which would have led to further issues for them. Likely in the beginning, there were a group of standard Homo sapiens living within this cave. However, something seems to have happened that trapped them. Their cave paintings show that they used to be more intelligent once upon a time, but have likely long since lost this ability. And this is something due to what is very well known in caves, and its name is scarcity. Any animal that exclusively lives in caves will experience this issue and must adapt accordingly. Ecosystems are tightly knit and can be thrown off balance extremely easily within caves. Likely this group got trapped a long time ago, and they were able to survive by eating what was in the cave. Judging by the fact that the cave-in happens due to earthquakes moving through the area, this is exactly what shut in the original family that lived in this cave. As they adapted to the system of living, their bodies would have begun losing the adaptations that we have, and then they would have lost the expensive adaptations like skin pigment, eyes, and brain function. With low nutrition, areas of the brain would have likely been less important, like higher thought, for instance. Neural connections over time would have very clearly degraded amongst generations if, say, an entire population of many were in this group. However, here's the problem. This likely wasn't a large group. In reality, there may have been only around 20 or 30 people if you were lucky. Which brings in our next issue, inbreeding. What happens when creatures inbreed? Well, it can amplify issues and aberrations within the genetic coding of an individual, making them even worse. Over time, this can have a phenotypic impact because of the genetics. Think of it this way. The entire human race were plunged into darkness underground, and we continued to have the genetic exchange necessary for maintaining health. Our evolution towards looking like these creatures would be incredibly slow. We may become more animalistic and feral over time due to scarcity, but our outward appearance would remain kind of more intact because of our genes. Other adaptations would arise as the successful survived, but you're talking millions of years before any considerable changes. In the descent, however, it can be assumed that these people's group are only maybe tens of thousands of years old based on cave paintings. And in fact, it takes place in the United States, where we didn't leave Africa in any real capacity until about 100,000 years ago. Because of this group couldn't be that old. For mutations to arise to make them look like this, and not just that, the differences amongst group members, says to me that inbreeding was a major issue. We see one female with a child. No other females are spotted, mainly meaning that she's like the cave bicycle. Everyone's had a ride unless it's some sort of alpha situation, which is really never divulged to us in the first movie. Then over time, possibly what was keeping them going is like another earthquake managed to shake loose the enclosing of the tunnels, but by then, the brain was already heavily affected by generations of inbreeding and loss of mental ability. So for instance, it's known that the nobility in Europe kind of stuck with the same type of inbreeding even amongst cousins. And this would have their children struggle to remain as mentally apt as their parents were, and this repeated cycle produced more and more successive mentally deficient children. Running with the same idea as concerning mental faculties, these creatures that were once human emerged back onto the surface and likely found that their skin burned by some unseen force due to lack of pigmentation. And with their brains massively degraded and their inability to see means that much like animals, they retreated back into the cave only to come out at night and hunt when their skin didn't burn. Their instincts were still intact from years of living within the cave, and because social ability is just ingrained in humans, these creatures are adopting the pack mentality. But their hearing had gotten better, which means that they were relatively successful hunters along with pack hunting when they were back on the surface. And this kept their subspecies alive for the time being, but again, there were no new genes being introduced into the lines, and because of this, as they continued, they would likely have become even more inbred to the point that infertility would become a massive issue, not to mention lifespan significantly decreased, and just general ability to do anything would elude them eventually. But this group of women actually just happened upon possibly one of the last few generations of these creatures. So massive oof at that point. And to think, they really just could have gone the natural way and resorted to cannibalism. But wouldn't that repeat the cycle?